Thank you for this very important conversation. Now we're going to start with our third panel. International Advocacy Partnerships, moderated by Trent Martin, Advocacy and Training Coordinator at 21 Wilberforce.
Thank you so much, everyone. It's great to be here. I'm as introduced, Trent Martin, the Advocacy and Training Coordinator with 21 Wilberforce. We have had wonderful partnerships with Coptic Solidarity over the years and really appreciate all of Lindsay's and all of your staff's work to pull off this event. Today, we're going to be talking about International Advocacy 101. So diving in with two of the most wonderful experts on this topic, who I've learned a lot from in our work, Sean Nelson and Ann Bawalda. One of as we look at the UN and other international forums, a lot of times they can seem a bit out of reach for our influence and some of our advocacy from advocates based here in the States or in other national contexts. However, there are lots of avenues for engagement from civil society organizations and from different states that can really make a difference on the ground in a practical way for those who are suffering from persecution. So without further ado, I want to introduce our two panelists, Sean Nelson, who is currently Senior Counsel for ADF International. He works with their team, with the team of allied lawyers across the Middle East, across Africa and Asia, to really support religious freedom around the world. And then we have Ann Bawalda, who's the Executive Director of Jubilee Campaign USA. She's a lawyer who's focused on international religious freedom and advocacy for many different refugees around the world as well, and runs her own law firm handling asylum and refugee claims. So first, I'd like to hand it over to Ann here, quick for some opening remarks.
I am so glad that we are back. Yes, an annual event. Woohoo! Praise the Lord for that. Thank you all for coming and being in attendance today. So one of the things that I am so excited about as well is that Christian Solidarity now has UN Human Rights Council access. It is ECOSOC accredited, which is excellent. And one of the things I'm sure Sean and I will be chatting about in our presentations is the fact that this access really opens the doors. So applause to Lindsay, who worked so hard to get it. Woohoo! It's great news. So what does that do for you? How does it open opportunities? It's amazing what you can do with consultative status. Obviously, we're all aware there's the General Assembly in New York, and Lindsay has actively, in the past, engaged there with other organizations before she joined Christian Solidarity. So you can be supporting her as she undertakes avenues and access to do things at the UN in New York, at the General Assembly. There's, I believe it's called the Fourth Commission or Third Commission. Anyway, that happens in the fall. You can raise opportunities. If you get a country to co-sponsor, you can host a side event. And hosting a side event on Egypt would be awesome. I'm sure the Egyptian government would not be too happy about that, but if you could find a government that's willing to co-sponsor it, then you can actually get into the UN and engage. Otherwise, you kind of have to go across the street, which is unfortunate. So that's a limitation on New York, but I mistakenly have mentioned Geneva a couple of times already. What happens in Geneva, Switzerland? It's the UN Human Rights Council. And it happens periodically throughout the year, quarterly. And engaging there are many, many opportunities. For instance, as an organization, you can host a side event. As an organization, you can provide written reports. There are many in this audience, and I appreciate, Ibrahim, I read your stuff. Thanks for sending it out. I think every day you send out materials. those materials could easily be refashioned into reports that are submitted. Those are official reports, NGO reports that are submitted. You can do that. You can also engage, again, with us hosting side events. Jubilee Campaign is hosting with another partner, ACLJ, this coming month on both Pakistan and Nigeria in July 11th. You set that up, you schedule it, you host it. You can also get governments to co-sponsor that. If you do, once again, you have more access and more time to make presentations. Another excellent avenue that you can engage in is with the special rapporteurs. What's a special rapporteur? It's a special theme where it's either country or thematic, and there is one on freedom of religion and belief, where you can write them reports, you can talk to them, you can invite them to your side events to speak. And when you do that, it raises the profile of the side event. And once again, they have to give an annual report. Engage with them. Find out, what's your theme this year? What are you going to talk about? Fit Egypt into the theme. Engage with them. There's also throughout the year, again, in Geneva, where the special rapporteur or other themes talk about things which you can then raise the Egyptian context for the Coptic Christians in Egypt. So you can do that again in writing or even signing up for speeches. Hulda Fahmy on Jubilee Campaign staff sent me the list of speeches that she signed up for in July. We don't know which one we'll get, where we'll be on, the topic, but she was like, oh, this might fit, and we'll still figure out which country we cover. But the point is we're getting in, we're speaking, and so, Coptic solidarity is so large in the sense of you have so many Coptics. Why not engage with that and bring your young people? You can actually, again, we used to do this on North Korea. Sorry if I bring in other examples of other countries. But we would take a whole classrooms of Korean young people, students at Handong International University or other universities, bring them to Geneva, give them leaflets, and they just canvass the place. And you can do that. We did it in New York as well at the General Assembly. So engage your young people and your youth, and you can further it that way. And so once again, this is a splendid opportunity, and we're eager for questions. There's a lot more I could say. I don't know if after that introduction, Sean may wish to comment as well, but we are eager to partner with Coptic Solidarity. Jubilee Campaign, I've been doing this since law school in 1987. That's how long I've been at this, particularly engaging with the UN. And so we're eager to stand with you and cooperate and co-host and do what we can to help. Thank you.
That's the most energetic I've seen Ann in a while. So I hope you understand how excited she and we all are that Coptic Solidarity now has EcoSoc status. And I think right as they got it, Lindsay reached out and was like, can we go meet your folks in New York so we can start planning about what we're going to be doing in the future and all the potential opportunities that there are at the UN. And so I think that really is something to celebrate, and glad that we were able to. Glad to be part of this discussion. ADF International, we are an international faith-based legal organization. As Trent mentioned, I primarily work myself with a number of lawyers throughout a lot of places that feature the most persecution in the world, especially persecution of Christians. Unfortunately, Egypt is in some of those tiers where you see a lot of that kind of thing. Last year at the Coptic Solidarity event, I spoke specifically on blasphemy laws and the particular blasphemy law and the national security kind of rhetoric that helps buoy that. I think in this discussion, we'll probably be talking about a number of different issues as they might relate to different kinds of advocacy at the United Nations and potentially in other fora. One thing I think that we've really learned, especially over the last couple of years on many of the cases and then issues that are related to those cases, things like forced conversions, forced marriages and kidnappings, blasphemy issues, and impunity for those who commit violence. To me, those are all significant issues, including within the Egyptian context and against the Coptic community. So for all of those things, one of the things we've learned is just how important it is to take a holistic approach for your advocacy, to really press every avenue that you have with very clear goals and very clear focuses. So when you're, what are your particular, on any issue set, what are your particular strengths, where are the particular advocacy avenues at the UN, but also at the European Parliament and the Council of Europe, here in the US, through the International Religious Freedom or Belief Alliance, through other kinds of special mechanisms and rapporteurs, not just limited to the international religious freedom or freedom of religion or belief context, but expanding outside of that. You can think of the child rights context. You can think of status of women issues. You can think of all sorts of different things, extrajudicial killings, kidnappings, and such. Sort of thing. So I'm very excited for this conversation and the discussion. I think all of those avenues are really important to elevating the issue set that everybody here is so interested in raising when it comes to these particular and really pretty egregious violations of religious freedom and other fundamental human rights that we see against the Copts in Egypt. So thank you.
All right, so we're going to dive into some of these questions. That was a great overview of some of the ways that we can get involved in some of the different forums. So as you already mentioned a few of those, the UN, the UPR process, some of the IPP, the International Belief Alliance. There's also lots of ways to engage with those. So and lots of options for civil society advocates who have limited amounts of time to really engage. So which institutions do you really recommend strategically focusing on, and what are some top strategies for engagement that you all have found effective in your work?
Excellent question. I wanted to give a little bit more elaboration on the Universal Periodic Review. And the reason is, once again, you can input into that. You don't even need consultative status for that. So anyone in the audience can write and submit related to that. Again, there are strategies with that. When you do that, you can find out what comments have been made in the past and in what ways the past comments have been then congested into recommendations. It's really important to come up with 3, maybe up to 5 specific cogent recommendations on a particular theme or topic that you're trying to raise. Because telling the bad stuff is important, but what helps policymakers and governments is what can we do about it? And so it's really important to put into your written materials good specific recommendations. The special rapporteurs pick up on those. They communicate those to the governments and ambassadors and so on. And again, that's a strong avenue to take. You can tell the story, for instance, of an egregious situation, but then how should that be corrected? Those are important factors to include.
It's the other way. I just want to echo that when it comes to the recommendations. I think, again, one thing that we've really been working on over the last few years is making sure that we are very deliberate and pretty aggressive in coordinating those particular recommendations, making sure we have a lot of NGO and civil society support for those, but also going to particular countries, their particular missions to get that, ensure that that's going to be there. And really doing that in a very particular way with very specific direct acts on particular subjects. So to me, one of the things that has been a very kind of an issue that's gotten a lot of attention recently and that a lot of countries are concerned about is the issue of trafficking of women and children and girls, the forced marriage, the forced conversion issues. Nobody wants that, right? Even if you're a country that discriminates against a particular population, you don't want that. There's a long history of sanctions on that. It causes really nasty kind of crime side effects to things, and it unites a lot of the world against you there. And so, your own security you're concerned about, and then you're really concerned about your reputation within the international community. So I think that's a very good avenue because we see that that's a major issue. Last year, Lindsay and I were talking about that particular issue, about the kidnapping of Christian and Coptic women and girls in Cairo and moving them out or into sex slavery or things like that. And so I would strongly recommend, Egypt's UPR is next year. The NGO contributions are due next summer. I think that should be a real major focus of NGOs and something that can capture a lot of special rapporteur attention. It will capture a lot of various countries' attention. There are also various complaint mechanisms that might be relevant to. When you have the Conventions on the Rights of the Child, that has a specific complaint mechanism that this could be relevant to. You have CEDAW, so the Convention on the Rights of Women. That's another area where you could have a complaint mechanism there, and also the normal communications mechanisms. So that to me is a very ripe area for focus, and it's one area where I think countries are very willing. The FORB area is unfortunately one area where countries are not usually willing to put much meat on the sanctions bones, and other countries know that, right? And so, the normal démarché and the normal, that's usually what you get. Occasionally you'll get stronger things. I think with China and Xinjiang has been one of those areas because it's so egregious. But that's going to be difficult here. But when it comes to issues of trafficking and forced marriage, affecting women and girls, that's something that really does draw the ire of a lot of people, and I think you'll have better success on that. So that's one recommendation. And of course, you can take that, same language and bring it to every different fora and just have it lined up throughout the year, right? Submit the NGO recommendations for the UPR, and then every month try to line up some other thing after that. So that it is constantly in the news, so that the diplomats in Egypt are hearing this constantly, over and over and over again. Countries don't like that; it's very annoying, and hopefully they'll take some kind of action against it.
I did want to pick up on something that Sean remarked about earlier, and that is there are a variety of special rapporteurs outside of FORB. And a couple that I'd written down, there's the special rapporteur on the field of cultural rights. Some of you know I practice immigration law, and a lot of my asylum cases are Egyptian Coptics. I insist to check the little ethnic box, Coptic. You all have your own language. You have you fit the definition as a Coptic as your own ethnicity. I mean, it was the Arab invaders that came in, right? So the Coptic church is the remnant of the Coptic people. And so I view that as an ethnic group. I check it off. It never has impacted any of my asylum cases, but it's a point. Why not raise it with the special rapporteur on cultural and ethnic identity issues? You speak Coptic in the church liturgies, right? You sing it. I've been to your Coptic churches, which is exciting that you do that. To me, it's quite special. Some of the others that may be of use would be freedom of opinion and expression. Can you do that in your culture? Are you able to have outside of the church any Christian programming or any sort of Christian speaking up? If not, you should write about that, present it to the Special Rapporteur on freedom of opinion and expression. How about the freedom of peaceful assembly and association? The fact you can't build your churches and the fact that all of the delays in the alleged, breakthroughs on being able to build and repair churches, which of course have been so minute, you should be raising those with the Special Rapporteur on the freedom of peaceful assembly and association. It's being denied. And so if you went down the list, there's the working group on arbitrary detention when Coptic Christians get detained. Again, there's a lot of other special rapporteurs and themes where you could probably squeeze in and fit in an opportunity to say something, write a report. They don't have to be long. In fact, there's page and word restrictions, so they don't want them long. But you should definitely submit.
I want to jump in on something that Sean had already started to talk about there of really diving into how do we take some of these UPR submissions or submissions to other bodies and really translate them to practical change on the ground too. How do we keep this at the forefront? Because as many of you I'm sure know, there's various criticisms of the United Nations where it's just a high-level talk shop that doesn't actually translate into actual action. Or even worse, sometimes it's used to clean up the reputations of bad actors like China or even Egypt in some cases. So how have you found effective ways to translate some of this high-level dialogue and report submissions into practical changes on the ground, either in Egypt or in other contexts?
No, I think it's a good point, and it's a real criticism, and I think a lot of organizations fail because they think that just because we this is not to contradict Anne's great point, which is please do submit as much as you can whenever you can on it, but that's the beginning, and that's not the end. That is not an outcome. That's an input. And if you are tracking your effectiveness just by the input without really following up on that to make sure you're getting the outcome, then it's going to fail to get what you want. Maybe it'll help on email chains or something, but it's going to fail. And so all of those things, the way that I think of a lot of the international kind of legal fora is credibility building, right? So that you are building a sort of case record of, we have shown, we're bringing you this information, right? And we've convinced people who have power in different aspects that that's important information and that something needs to happen about that. And when you've done that enough in different areas through different pressure points, then the country hopefully starts getting nervous about it. This, I think, is very common within the prisoners of conscience area, which is something all three of us up here work very, very closely on, and where it's one of the reasons we really focus on kind of putting a face to a particular prisoner, really getting their names. Well, remember this person, right? And it's because the country doesn't like that particular thing, and it's a relatively easy thing for them to rectify, right? So other countries have a very straightforward ask: release them, right? They may also ask change your law in some fashion, or at least interpret it differently. Stop doing that. But the release them, that's something that they can do. And so the cost of keeping the person imprisoned in terms of your reputation, in terms of the time you're spent with diplomats, not talking about some business development or some kind of investment opportunity or anything like that, but spent talking about human rights violations and what are you going to do to stop that, that begins to add up to them. And so that's something where they can do that. And I think it goes a little bit with Bob's point in the previous session on kind of thinking about negative and positive sanctions, carrot and stick approach. If you're all carrot, then nobody's going to change because you're just going to get what you want, right? If I give in to my kids every time they want something, I can tell them, please stop doing that. It's never going to have any effect. If you're all stick, you're not really going to get much of what you want either, because somebody's going to start turning to some other people. And so it's that balance of things. So I think on more complex issues, providing solutions as you follow up on your reports, as you speak with different missions, if you're using particular complaint processes that require the governments to respond, that can be really good in terms of putting a little political pressure. They have to work a little bit. Nobody likes working. So that's, I think, a small bit. But also it gives you a sense of how they are treating this, right? Even if they completely lie in the communication, that's valuable information for you to know, because that's probably what they're saying to other diplomats. And you can work to counter that. But as you get into those deeper conversations, you can begin to think, okay, what is a broader way that we can get these benefits for us, for human rights, while maybe there's something that can help the other side. We don't necessarily know that. It's not necessarily our job to figure out all the dynamics, but that is the job of a lot of the people who work at the Africa Bureau, who work at the mission. They're the ones who know all of those things and are supposed to be experts. Who knows how much that's true, but they're supposed to be experts in being able to package some of that stuff and have it go through. So what you want is for your particular issue set to be in that kind of bag of tools. So the higher you can make the credibility and the concern in the different fora through the different mechanisms, I think the more likely you're going to be one of those areas in the conversations you're not privy to.
And in addition to what Sean just said, I would also continue to, again, recommend engaging with the special rapporteurs, because when you do, and they speak about it, of course, it comes with the authority of the position they're holding. And so that's a little bit more than an input. They're actually engaging. And so we have on a number of occasions with different of the special rapporteurs tried to put together where you invite them to go to the country to do fact-finding. When they do it, it is official. And a lot of countries close the door and say, no, you can't come. But at least then you have the country on the record refusing to cooperate with the special rapporteur. So engage with the special rapporteur and encourage them to go to the country and strategize with them. I mean, they're not unapproachable. They actually are very approachable. They're very interested in the topic, or they wouldn't be donating their time to do it. Special rapporteurs are not paid. So they do it because they, too, care about the cause. So if you engage with the special rapporteurs and then encourage them to visit the country or make the request to visit the country, you can use that information hopefully in additional advocacy. But if they actually go to the country, then you can help provide them with lists of people to meet with, lists of organizations to meet with. And it often happens, a special rapporteur goes, like Nigeria, and then the Nigerian government only lets them see a specific set of people, not the ones you wanted them, and they can speak out against the fact that they were prohibited from meeting with certain communities, and so forth, because once again, that exposes the country for its duplicity, and at least they're not doing what they're doing with impunity. You're speaking up about it, but definitely engagement.
Wonderful. Well, if there's any questions at this time from the audience, please send those up. But as we're wrapping up here, in specific relation to Egypt, are there any cases that you all have seen the international community really rally around and push for practical changes there? Any successful cases or unsuccessful cases that you've seen, and what can we learn from those?
I'd say, on prisoners of conscience, so for Rami Kamel, last year when he was released, a Coptic journalist and covered lots of the issues, that I think was able to galvanize a lot of support, because it was not actually primarily a freedom of religion thing, it was a freedom of expression thing, freedom of the press, and that being able to report on particular violations is something that the international community takes extremely seriously, because if you can't get any information out, they can't know anything about it, right? And that makes it very difficult to assess what's going on in the country. And so, protecting sort of human rights defenders is a big priority. And so I think, with Rami Kamel, Coptic Solidarity did wonderful advocacy in galvanizing a broad swath of people to keep reminding folks of what he was going through, of the prosecution, of the imprisonment. And he was able to get congressional advocates specifically to write letters. The U.S. Congress members are, we may, I'm here in the Capitol, but we may sometimes think stuff is kind of ridiculous or whatever, but they have a very, very high profile internationally, especially for parliamentarians. So that I think, when you're talking about the Tom Lantos, the Human Rights Foundation, the Defending Freedoms Project, and being able to specifically advocate, getting a member of Congress to advocate for a particular prisoner is very important. And we just know that at a lot of different levels in the State Department in various different countries, foreign ministers of state, they were pressing that as well. So I think all of that, and as I mentioned earlier, releasing a prisoner is a pretty easy thing to do, right? One of the harder things to do is to stop them from imprisoning the people the next time, right? And so that issue of either impunity or sort of harassment for arrests, I think that's a really difficult area to get traction on, because people are happy somebody's released, and then you say, hey, that's fantastic, and then the next person gets imprisoned and it takes another year or two, and they really use the process there as the punishment. I think there are some issues, as I already mentioned, on trafficking issues where the fact that the victims really cannot speak for themselves. That's another area where you can get some traction, because governments have to be able to speak for them. And so yeah, I would say, on some of the prisoners' conscience, it's been there. Some of the dialogue, the sort of interreligious dialogue, it's not, some of it's a little hazy, but I mean, that is something that's positive, and there's been a lot of direction there. But translating some of that hazy language into real specifics that are in concert with an international law that Egypt has signed on to, and that's what you're dealing with when you're at the United Nations. I think that's really the next step to push those folks forward.
I think this is a challenging question when you do have centuries of precedents that you're pushing back on. With the earlier panelists who described some of the levels of discrimination within the structure of the law, within the context of society, how do you break through that? Well, sometimes I give myself at least encouragement that we're doing the right thing and doing something. It could be worse. If we weren't speaking out, would the police be responding at all when a church is burnt down or explosions happen? I mean, we always point out they didn't respond fast enough. A cathedral was attacked. They didn't do something fast enough. If we didn't do that, what would happen next time? Would they respond at all? So I do think that it is something we will never really know, whether the words we spoke today will have that kind of impact tomorrow to have prevented something, because obviously it didn't happen. And so this encourages me to keep speaking out, and I hope it encourages all of you, because you are dealing with centuries-old precedent and laws and structures, and we have to keep at it. And, one thing we haven't touched on, but education. I mean, why is there so much discrimination within the educational structure? I mean, again, I know that's something Lindsay in the past has written about and tried to act on and take up. And that is something that needs to constant engagement as well, because if youth are being taught that Coptic Christians are second-class citizens or worse, then, it won't change, because the next generation is poisoned. So I think efforts to change how things are taught as well is important.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Anne and Sean. We really appreciate your contributions in this, and congratulations again to Coptic Solidarity for their new UN ECOSOC accredited status. I know all of us are looking forward to continuing our work with Coptic Solidarity on this. And I just wanted to close with a quote as well from Adelaide Stevenson, who is our UN representative from the U.S. And he said that the United Nations is like a spade. It's not a self-operating instrument. It is what you make out of it, with the work you put into it. So let's put in the work and really make some change on this international stage. Thanks so much.